You've probably heard the name Ray Dalio. He's an absolute legend in the investing world. But you know what's wild? His core ideas about wealth are actually surprisingly simple. So in this explainer, we're going to break down his principles and see how they can guide a whole new generation of investors, just like you. So, how did it all start for a guy like Dalio? Well, it wasn't in some fancy Wall Street office. It was on a golf course when he was just 12 years old working as a caddy. He'd listen to all these successful investors talk, take the money he earned, and just dive in. His very first stock pick tripled. Now, he's the first to tell you that was just pure dumb luck, but it taught him something huge. The market, it's a game. And that idea right there, that's everything. Thinking of finance as a game. It's not some big, scary, unknowable monster. No, it's a system. It's got rules, it has cause and effect, and if you take the time to actually learn how it's played, you can get pretty darn good at it. So you can see how his journey was shaped by these really key moments. That first lucky stock purchase got him totally hooked. But the real game changer was being a clerk on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange in 1971. That was the year President Nixon completely changed the rules of money. And that lesson, well, it stuck with Dalio for his entire career. And this brings us to what might be the single most important idea in Dalio's entire playbook. Honestly, it sounds almost too simple, but getting this is the secret to seeing market bubbles before they burst. And the idea is this: wealth is not the same thing as money. Okay, so if wealth isn't money, what exactly is money? Well, according to Dalio, it has to do two things. First, it's a medium of exchange. You can use it to buy stuff. And second, it has to be a store of wealth, meaning it should hold its value. And here's the crucial part. Money is what actually settles a deal. Once you pay, the transaction's over. It's done. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. Think about your stock portfolio or your house or even a stake in a startup. It all feels like wealth, right? But Dalio's point is that it's just an illusion of wealth until you sell it for cold, hard money. A bubble is created when there's way, way more of this paper wealth out there than there is actual money to cash it all out. And this isn't just some abstract theory. Check this out. Dalio says that right now in the US, for every $1 of actual money, there's $8.50 of this perceived wealth. That is a massive gap. And if that number makes you a little nervous, it should. It's at the same level we saw right before the huge crashes in 1929 and back in 2000 with the dot-com bubble. So let's just break it down one more time. Wealth is the number you see on a screen. It's paper value. It's prone to bubbles, and you have to sell it to use it. Money is what you get when you hit sell. It's your real, tangible buying power. Getting this difference is absolutely everything. But, okay, this leads to another problem. What if the very money we're all chasing is flawed? Dalio argues that the kind of money we use today, fiat currency, it comes with its own really big risks. This quote from him just gets right to the heart of it. When you're holding cash or a government bond, what you're really holding is a promise. It's an IOU from the government. Our whole money system is literally built on debt. And Dalio's big worry is that governments are printing way, way too many of these IOUs, and that just makes the money in your pocket worth less and less over time. And this all goes back to that moment in 1971 we talked about. Before then, a US dollar was basically like a coupon for a certain amount of gold. But then Nixon completely cut that tie. Suddenly, the dollar became a fiat currency, which means it's only backed by the government's promise. And that opened the floodgates to printing money, which is where this whole debt problem comes from. So if we're in this tricky spot where our wealth might be a bubble and our money is losing its value, what are you supposed to do? This is where we get into Dalio's actual strategy for how to protect yourself and grow your assets in a world like this. Okay, his first piece of advice is pretty simple. Don't try to time the market. Instead, it's all about how you set up your portfolio. He suggests that most of us should probably have about 5 to 15% in what he calls an alternative money. And for him, the classic example is gold. Think of it like insurance that does well when regular currencies start to look shaky. I know what you're thinking. What about Bitcoin? Dalio definitely talks about it. He sees it as a form of money, for sure, but he points out some pretty big differences when you compare it to gold. I mean, central banks have vaults full of gold, right? They're not doing that with Bitcoin. And while physical gold is hard to trace, every Bitcoin transaction is on a public ledger. So yeah, he personally owns a little bit of it, but he still sees gold as the more fundamental, time-tested store of wealth. But beyond just what to have in your portfolio, Dalio's advice gets a lot more personal. It's not just about what you buy, it's about how you approach learning and, well, life. For anyone just starting out, his advice really boils down to 2 steps. First, you gotta play the game. You can't just read about it on the sidelines. He talks about his grandkids setting up a little cider stand. By doing that, they're learning about costs, profit, the whole shebang. It's the same with markets. You can start small. And second, you have to get around the pros. That's what he did as a caddy. When you surround yourself with people who play the game well, you learn so much faster because you're not just getting facts, you're absorbing a whole mindset. And that's what this all comes back to, really. Dalio's principles aren't just for stocks and bonds. They're a blueprint for finding a game you're passionate about, learning the rules inside and out, and just getting better every day. So the real question isn't for him, it's for you. What game will you choose to play?